Who's responsible for the song choice?
That was me. It's kind of lame. I apologize. Okay, they should start rolling in now.
It's better than elevator music.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you guys until Nancy's ready.
I'm ready, Chris.
All right. All right, Nancy, you're good to go.
Good afternoon, parents and community members. Thank you so much for attending our parent engagement session today. The Department of Special Education is happy to host our session on progress monitoring. My name is Nancy Ingalls, and I'm the Personalized Learning Officer here in Douglas County School District, and I'm honored to kick off today's presentation. We're scheduled for 1 hour, so scheduled to end here at 1 p.m. This session also will be recorded, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. We have some fabulous presenters today, and I want to introduce them. First, we have Marta McGovern, who is a special education coordinator. Linda Neiman is also a special education coordinator. Dan Kangley is a special education teacher at Sage Canyon Elementary School. Chantel Albert is a school psychologist. She works at Buffalo Ridge Elementary and also with our 18 to 21 Bridge program. And Jennifer Froistad is a speech language pathologist. She works at Chaparral High School. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions that you'd like to send us, please make note of them. Later on, we'll send a follow-up survey to you where you will be able to submit your questions to us, and we can have somebody reach out to you via email or even give you a call. Now I want to turn it over to our Special Education Director, Sarah Cannon. She'll say a few words before the presentation.
Thank you, Nancy, and I also want to thank our panelists for helping present today. What we're going to talk about today is progress monitoring. And the presentation, we have done a lot of training throughout the district with all teams related to progress monitoring. You're going to see examples of what progress monitoring looks like in these individuals' practice and in their schools today. If you have questions about progress monitoring, like Nancy said, you can certainly fill out the survey that we'll send out at the conclusion of today's presentation. But if you're listening today and you're like, this is not happening for my students, we do not have progress monitoring in place for my students' IEP goals, we ask that you reach out to your child's case manager and also the special education coordinator for that school, which we'll talk about who those folks are here soon, so that we can problem solve with you. So this is, we've laid out our vision for the district and how we want progress monitoring to occur. But again, you're seeing examples today, so things may not look exactly like this in your child's school. I'm going to turn it over to Linda Neiman, who's going to kick us off a little bit today and talk about who you can contact if you have questions.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So let's go ahead and share the screen. Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is the agenda will help us make it through our progress monitoring, broken down to what it is, why it's important, and some examples from 3 of our special education providers. At the end, we're going to discuss some next steps and some resources. The district has 2 effective flow of communication worksheets. One is for the in-person learning model, which Marta's opening for us right now. And the other one is for the e-learning model. Both of these flows were created to provide parents and families with a guide for school and district contacts. They are designed to follow the flow from the top to the bottom as you reach out for assistance. The lines are also nice because as you work with your school team, you can write in who the name of the special education case manager is or who the counselor's name is, so that way you can have a quick reference if you need to. And on page 2, you'll see the names, the email addresses, and the phone numbers for the special education coordinators, along with the assignments that we have, so you can contact us pretty easily if you need us. Thank you. So now let's talk about what is progress monitoring. So based on Wright's Law right now, progress monitoring is a scientifically based practice, and it's used to assess your child's academic progress. It's used to evaluate the effectiveness of instruction, and in progress monitoring, the teacher uses short tests to evaluate your child's progress in the specific areas. Next slide.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm sorry, it wouldn't keep going.
No problem. Thank you, Marta. Thank you all for just waiting patiently for a few minutes. This is one of our first parent engagements for this school year, and we're very excited to have technology to open the doors to more. But with that comes some patience and grace with our technology.
If Marta's having trouble sharing her screen, I'm happy to try to share mine.
I'm almost back there. I apologize, guys.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. Nice job, Marta. Thank you. So going back to talking a little bit about what progress monitoring is. So it's used to assess the student's performance. We use it to quantify the student's rate of improvement or the student's response to the interventions we have in place. We use it for the data to make sure that the IEP is more effective and suited for the student's individual needs. And it also aids to evaluate the effectiveness of the intervention. The other part about progress monitoring is it can look very different in collections of data. It involves ongoing sample collections for skills that are important towards achievement. We want to make sure that the data measures the student's response to the teaching strategies or the interventions that are being used. And then the why part of progress monitoring is important because when teachers use a systematic process that will help them with progress monitoring, it tracks the student's progress in reading and math, and it helps us to identify in general what some of the different forms of instructions are and helps us know whether or not the students are achieving better. And then sticking with this slide, the reasoning for progress monitoring, it's just important because the overall data tells us whether or not the students are improving and whether or not the teaching methodologies are helping. And that's what we're all here for, is to make sure that the kids are making improvement. The next slide, we get asked a lot about progress monitoring versus progress reporting. So although progress monitoring and reporting may seem like the same thing, they have differences. So far in the presentation, we've talked a little bit about what progress monitoring is, why it's important, and a little bit about the how. But let's talk about progress reporting in a general term. So we're going to define it as a statement or details that help us know how far the student has come. And it helps us understand where the student is in current status. So it's a statement of where the student currently is. And with progress monitoring, it's an ongoing assessment, and all of the information and all of the data from progress monitoring go into progress reporting. So let's talk a little bit about how it's measured. So we collect data to determine the student's present levels. And those we sometimes call baseline data, baseline for the goals. And then we set goals for instructional outcomes. And we use data to evaluate the effectiveness of the interventions for establishing targeted skills and producing broader, more comprehensive learning gains. This ensures the students are experiencing the reduced risk over time. So now we're going to move into some examples. All right, so I am turning over the presentation now to Dan, Chantel, and Jennifer. As a group, they represent elementary through secondary, and also that includes 18 to 21 in our bridge programming. Dan, we'll let you take it from there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Linda. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dan Kangley, and I am a moderate needs teacher here at Sage Canyon Elementary. Just so you know a little bit about who I am, I have been with the district for 9 years and have covered different aspects of K through 12 special ed over my time here. I'm a special ed generalist and a master's in educational leadership. And again, super happy to be a part of Douglas County, and want to take a quick moment to thank you all for being here and emphasize that you're a very important part of your child's educational team. We're all very much in this together, and I want to make sure that you understand that your voice is important when your IEP team is making decisions. So moving into progress monitoring and how it works, at least I will be taking a bit of an academic lens in this view, as that's really my wheelhouse. We can go ahead and move into that next slide, please. There we go. Or yeah, this one, the current levels. Sorry, I've got two screens going. Anyway, beginning off with your child's IEP, you're going to be looking at that current levels of performance section. And our goal in this section is to always make sure that we're telling your student's story. Your student's IEP is their document, no matter what school they attend. And I want to make sure everybody understands that that's the view that we take. So the information contained in that present levels really should be accurate in representing your student as to where they are, so that if this child moves or is handed off to another school, that school is able to look at that and have a very good idea of where to meet this student. That gets into how this is going to be collected. In our present levels, we're going to have different areas of formalized data points and collection regarding reading, writing, math, etc., all of our academic activities. And it's going to talk about where they are, where that relates as far as their grade level and their peers, and where we want to go. From there, we're going to go ahead and write goals as far as their academic progress goes. And you should be seeing all of those goals will be written in a SMART format. And SMART is another one of the acronyms you're going to hear in the educational world. In this arena, it's going to stand for the goals need to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Just as a quick example, you can see as I put there on a screen, goal from one of a simulation of a goal from a student's IEP. When presented with a list of multisyllabic words in isolation, the student will read with 80% accuracy as measured on recurring reading probes by the completion of the IEP period. So it has a time frame that it's going to take place in. It's meeting them in a measurable or in an area that makes sense as to where they're starting. And it's relevant because it's tied into the academic standards of that child's grade level. And also, so now when you get into your IEP and you'll see these goals written in there, you'll notice that there is a progress monitoring section of the IEP. It's down below your standards as you look through your child's documentation. And this will list a baseline. So that's where they are today. It will tell us where we want to go by the end of the IE period. And it'll also designate a measurement time frame. That is generally anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And that's when we actually collect the formal data as far as our data points go for measuring progress. Next slide, please. Thank you. As far as how we collect this data from the moderate needs standpoint, this can be done in a variety of ways. Linda touched on some of that as far as how it's going. It can be collected either in group or individually. That may look like a group writing prompt or possibly a mathematics mad minute or a quick minute of math facts, etc. And then you can see in this representation, this is some of the information you'll be receiving on your progress note. Now that it's incorporated into the actual IEP program, this will give you data points and it'll actually show you visually as a just snapshot of how your student's doing in relation to the gray line on this little image that shows the projection and where they're going for the goal versus the end date. You'll see in this example, the student was hitting their goal rather early on and they're just continuing to progress forward, which is a fantastic thing that we'd like to see. You'll also may notice in your students' goals, they may have objectives listed. These are sub areas within the goals. And this is simply a way for us to break down a goal into quickly attainable steps. And so like say with a reading goal, you may have a student that starts out with letter recognition, moves into sounds, moves into words. Those will probably be listed as objectives under the heading of a goal. We can go ahead to the next slide, please. Fantastic. So I just wanted to bring up a few points. One, again, thank you for being here and being a part of your child's education. I can't say enough about how important it is that you're involved in this. And so I wanted to bring up a few things, especially now with some of the challenges that we have with remote learning and hybrid learning and whatever the future holds. So I wanted to bring up a few things that you can do as partners to help us in the measurement and adjustment of your child's academics. And really that comes down to a couple of things. Allow your students, when you're notified through your case manager or your moderate needs teacher or however it's handled, that your student has some progress monitoring tasks to complete, especially if those are on a remote day, because that's the situation we're all in. It can be very, very difficult, but allow your students to be challenged. As educators, we need accurate information as far as the students' levels and where they are. As a parent, I completely understand we always want to help our children. This is a time where we really want to let them stand on their own 2 feet and show us what they can do and know, because that helps us adjust instruction and adjust goals and move forward accordingly. Also, help out with encouraging your students to participate in their online time. It is very important to keep consistency, especially like in our hybrid model. We see a lot of great interaction on the days they're in the building, the days off. If we can get a little assistance with participating in those regular activities, that will greatly help our students. Repetition and consistency is key to closing academic gaps. And finally, help provide your student with academic area. So create a workstation in your home environment. That can be a kitchen table, that can be a desk somewhere. It doesn't have to be fancy, but if you can help them set them up for success in a distraction-free place, that again, that will help them attend to task, attain their focus, and again, you know, work towards what we all are here for, which is improvement in your child's academic areas. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this along to Chantel. So thank you very much for your time, and it's great presenting to you.
Hi, I'm Chantel Albert. I am the school psychologist at Buffalo Ridge Elementary, and this year I'm also at our Bridge program 1 day a week. I'm trying to remember if it's my 7th or the start of my 8th year here in the district, but I also love Douglas County. I love my school. And so, yeah, I'm glad to be here and talking about progress monitoring from a mental health perspective. So you're going to probably hear a little bit of redundancy because there are things that are similar across all of our different areas of expertise, but then I think each area also has small things that are different. So I kind of wanted to talk just briefly about how we decide on goals, because progress monitoring, of course, is to monitor a student's progress toward their goals. So from a mental health perspective, often goals come from the data that we get through the formal evaluation process, which is the big reevaluation that happens every 3 years. Dan talked a lot about the present levels in the IEP. And so you'll also find that as we talk about present levels, that helps inform new goals moving forward. Or sometimes there's just things that come up, areas of concern, whether it's from home or school, but really it's around things that are significantly impacting social, emotional, or behavioral performance in the school setting. And then once we identify the goals, we write them, we try to keep them smart, like Dan described, and then to determine our baseline, we look at the goal, and at that time, how is the student performing, and that gives us our starting point for the baseline. For mental health, I know that progress monitoring has those set intervals that are in the child's IEP. So you will find that formal data that is there when you get your progress reports, and the frequency of that is indicated in your child's IEP. I know at the elementary level, at least at Buffalo Ridge, it often happens along the same time as report cards. So we do them at the end of every semester. So mental health providers, just like learning specialists, are taking data at those set intervals and we're putting them into Enrich. But also there's informal data that happens every session. So informal data really informs what we teach and how we adjust to make sure we're doing the things as educators that, support your child in making growth. And so I wanted to talk briefly about, you can go on to the next slide, about that. So there really are two kinds of data when we talk about progress monitoring. There's qualitative data, which is data that it's not something that you can put a number on necessarily. It's data that could be obtained through a formal or informal observation. Sometimes mental health providers will go in and will watch your child as part of, their social emotional time. We can watch them in class and we'll take data on what we see, or we get information from other people working with your child about how they're doing in different school settings. That information is super important, and it really helps drive instruction during small group sessions or one-on-one sessions. But then there's also the quantitative data, and that's the data that's really, it's numerical, it's observable. So I threw some examples in here. So for example, when we're in small group, how many prompts do I have to give before they can demonstrate the skill that we're targeting? If I ask them, how many coping strategies can they identify? How long does it take for them to calm down when they're really upset? if there's a rubric, what is their specific number that they're getting on that rubric? And those tend to be the kind of data points you're going to get in your progress reports. But qualitative data is a huge part of that. And so knowing that that information is also really important, and sometimes more important than that one number, because we can learn a lot more from what we observe sometimes than just a number. So I know that when the SLP talks, she's going to have some really good examples, and a lot of times the ways SLPs will progress monitor overlaps with mental health. So I think she'll talk about rubrics and some other things. And we do that as well. But I thought I would use an example that's more behaviorally based, because sometimes we'll have students that have social emotional goals and maybe they also have a behavior plan. So for this example, this student in this example had a functional behavior assessment, which is a formal evaluation where we were gathering data just around behavior. And then we used that information to identify the needs. And for this child, they were averaging, let's say, a half an hour outside of the classroom every time they were getting upset. So this student had anxiety and maybe they get stuck in their thoughts, and that ends up becoming verbal or physical aggression. And so the goal really is to reduce the amount of time the student is spending outside of the classroom. And so there's a couple ways that we track that. And on the next slide, so goals like this are really multifaceted. So obviously during small group, there's data happening, qualitative and quantitative data around how the student's progressing with emotional regulation. So we're teaching coping strategies, we're allowing practice, we're looking at prompting and what the student's able to demonstrate based on the formal data we gather, and then the informal data we adjust instruction. So that part of the goal is occurring in one setting, but then there's also this formal data that's being taken really by any staff member who might have to support that child. So if they are getting called because the student's really struggling, we're also gathering data around that so that we can have data for multiple settings and seeing, you know, is what I'm doing in my room actually translating to growth in other parts of the school. So all staff supporting the student will gather data, and then as the mental health provider, I monitor that data. I might use it for progress monitoring. So if the goal for this student is to reduce time outside of the classroom, I'm obviously looking at not just the data that I'm taking, but the data that everyone is taking. So that may be getting logged into Enrich, but then I can look at the data and take it and then meet with the teacher or the case manager, sometimes admin, and we sit and then we qualitatively also talk about what we're seeing, and that helps us to adjust accommodations or supports that are occurring in the classroom. How do we modify and support the student in different environments so that we can see growth? So this is just an example of what a data collection sheet could look like. They don't always look like this, but try to make those usable for teachers because they have a lot on their plate. So whatever format, whether it's paper or electronic, but this just gives an idea of the different kinds of things we look for. And then here's an example of what some of that data looks like in Enrich. This one's a little bit different because for this student, the lower numbers are better. And so you can see at the start, we were, you know, having some incidences, and then we have periods of success, which is pretty typical. You're going to see ups and downs in progress monitoring. It's never about one individual data point. It's more about a trend over time. So that's something you might see as well as, I know I like to say, in 3 out of 4 opportunities, because I want to look for a trend over time. And you can see we were doing really well. And then, you know, coming back's been a little bit of a struggle, which isn't unusual, but we are already starting to settle. So good data there.
My turn. So I'm Jennifer Freustad, and I'm the speech language pathologist at Chaparral High School, and this is my 3rd year in the district. And kind of like Dan and Chantel said, a lot of it does overlap, and so there's some differences, especially I feel like a lot of the way that SLP's Progress Monitor does overlap with some of the things that the mental health providers are doing, since we do collaborate and team together a lot. But yeah, so can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So kind of going back to what Chantel had said about quantitative and qualitative data. So I like to get a full picture of how my students' communication skills are. And in order to do that, I feel like we have to take data in different areas. So the quantitative data is the data that you're gonna see on those graphs that, well, majority of an SLP's graph that is a number. The graphs that we showed that both Chantel and Dan showed. And so this is just an example. So in a small group setting, when provided with a picture cue and a model, student will pronounce the vocalic R sound at the word level in 80% accuracy. So that 80% accuracy is gonna be your quantitative data. So it's numerical or statistical in nature. And then the qualitative data is the data that's a narrative, more along the lines of a narrative, and kind of gives more details that can't be pictured by a number. And so this can be how they're doing in the classroom, how they're doing with less prompting or more prompting, how their overall intelligibility is. For an R sound, how is their intelligibility impacting their mental health? How is it impacting their ability to have conversations with peers? All the types of things that make up what that communication area is really looking at. And so included in that is the amount of support. I think that's really important to see how many cues, what type of cues, how many prompts, what type of prompts, models, etc. And then I really like to have data in different environments. From classroom teachers, especially in a high school where kids are in academic classrooms, they're in elective classrooms, they're just how they're doing socially. A lot of them are meeting with mental health providers or, other providers in the building. And so just getting data and how their communication skills are across different environments instead of taking data only having in my room. I like to have a full picture of that student's communication skills. So those are some of the ways that data is collected. And so yeah, you're good, Marta. Thank you. And so these are just some examples of different ways that I collect data in sessions, especially for the numerical data or that quantitative piece. And so these are just two different options where I can put the student's goal and activity and the date and then take data throughout my sessions with them. And so that kind of just gives a realistic example of how data is collected in one way. So a lot of you have probably heard the word rubrics. We love to use rubrics, as well, a lot of SLPs love to use rubrics. I do like to use rubrics. I feel like it allows us to show growth in the full picture of the student's communication skills, kind of like I talked about earlier. I love this rubric. It's to my left, but I don't know how it is to you guys. It's the one that says the quantitative, qualitative, and level of support. Because I feel like sometimes when you just take a number, it doesn't, for certain students and certain communication skills, it doesn't gain the full picture of the student's needs. And so when in this rubric, it kind of encompasses all the areas and really is able to show where they're at and the growth that we want to make with them on those skills. And you can do that for social communication. You can do that for expressive or receptive language, for fluency. Their rubrics can really work for any area of communication that an SLP could be working on, also articulation. And then these graphs at the bottom are just similar to the ones that the providers before me showed. It's just kind of the ones that are now going to be sent out also when it'll give you a visual for progress reports too, but we put in the data that we take so that it creates a pretty graph so that you're able to visually see that picture better. Okay, so when I was thinking about what to put in this presentation, I kind of thought, how can I show parents what it looks like for a process from an annual IEP to an annual IEP. So I know there's a lot of writing in here, but I thought that it could be really helpful to kind of look at how I progress monitor from one annual IEP to the next. And so pretend that there's an annual IEP meeting in October. That's when, kind of like Chantel was saying, I look at the data, which includes past evaluation reports. It could be data collected, like the quantitative and qualitative level of support, academic classroom information, teacher, student, parent reports, any other information that's prevalent. And then that's how the goal is created. And then to meet those individualized communication needs. And then I decide how we're going to collect that data on the goal throughout the year. So what data will be collected, in what form, how often, where. Usually it's by me, so the by whom, but I just want, it's important for that plan to be ongoing and frequent for the data collection. And then I take baseline data on that goal, and then I enter baseline data into the progress monitoring probes on Enrich, which is that graph that has been shown quite a bit. And that's when we choose the frequency for the progress monitoring probes and set up a progress monitoring schedule. I do take some type of data every session that I see a kid, just to make sure we're on track, but I take that hard progress monitoring probe data typically every 4 weeks, but it's based on individualized need. So it depends how that student's doing and the individualized needs of that student and their communication needs. And then I choose evidence-based interventions to target that goal, and I make an intervention plan based on that goal. And then from intervention sessions through like October to December, if it was an October annual, again, take some type of data every session, take that hard data for the progress monitoring probes every 4 weeks, or the frequency schedule chosen based on individualized needs. And then I always enter in, I have like sheets that I keep for the qualitative data, the amount of support, other things that are going on in the environment to gain a full picture of that student and their current communication skills. And then with that data that's all collected, I evaluate the effectiveness of the interventions and the intervention plan and method throughout. And that's how we're able to adjust interventions and intervention methods when that's needed, to make sure that the student is making growth and the growth that we want them to make within that school year, from annual to annual. And then progress reports go out in the high school and semesterly. So it would be progress report in December. And that's when I collect final semester hard data on qualitative and quantitative. And that's what's written into the reports, as well as the graph is now sent home as well. And just those are supposed to give a full picture of the student and, again, their current communication skills. Intervention sessions from January to May look very similar to the intervention sessions process from October to December. The biggest difference is when students return to school from winter break, I like to take data immediately within those first week or 2 weeks to make sure their communication skills have not regressed since December, and kind of determine where their present levels are for this next semester, since we're coming back from a break. Again, I take that data every session, but that hard data goes in during the frequency or schedule that's chosen, and I continue to evaluate the effectiveness of the intervention. And then progress reports in May are similar to progress reports in December. I collect the final semester hard quantitative data and qualitative data, enter that in, and give a full picture of the student and their current communication goal and skills in that progress report that's based on the progress monitoring data. And then students, if it's an annual from October to October, the intervention sessions in August through December, same thing when the student returns from school from summer break, or if they're coming from ESY, I still want to make sure I take data immediately or pretty soon when they return to make sure that their communication skills have not regressed, and kind of where they are, and if they were in ESY, look over those progress monitoring levels and data that was collected over the summer as well. And then continue to take that data, continue to monitor, collaborate with all the other providers and classroom teachers, elective teachers, to make sure that the effectiveness of the interventions are where they need to be. And then at that 2021 annual meeting that would be in October, that's when I would collect all the final data and kind of look at the full picture of where they're at, including all those pieces, quantitative, qualitative, amount of support, and different environments. And then use that data as well as past evaluations and other information to create new individualized communication goals to meet their needs and report that out. So I know that's a lot of information, but I thought it might help to just put it in from an annual to an annual, since that might be more familiar, just to see what the process looks like.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So thank you for Nancy, you're back to you.
Thanks, everybody. Before I close us out, after hearing from Dan, Chantel, and Jennifer, I wanted to give Sarah, our special education director, and Marta and Linda a chance to see if there's anything that they might want to add to what our presenters had to say, since we have a little bit of time.
I don't know if you can hear me because I lost audio.
We can hear you now, Sarah.
Okay, great. Since we lost audio, I didn't know what Nancy finished off with. I want to thank Dan and Jennifer and Chantel today. I think they represent what our school teams are doing and their disciplines. Also, it looks progress monitoring looks a little bit different, as they indicated, by student and by goal. I also appreciate the comments that you are our partners in this process. That if you have questions about data, please feel free to ask your child's case manager about the data. We're happy to share our data if you need, and if you have questions, we would like to sit down and explain that data to you. So that does look different for each student and for each goal. The data for progress monitoring is very important as we make decisions about instructional services your student may need, or if we look at what, if there's additional needs that come up, or again, if an intervention we're doing just isn't quite working and the growth isn't what we'd expect, we'd like to use this data to adjust that instruction. So we do appreciate your collaboration with us in this process. You really are your student's best first teacher, and so we appreciate that. This team, this year, the district is committed to parent engagement, and we will be doing more parent engagement sessions as we go throughout the year. Let me pull up those dates real quick. But we're looking at in November 17th, talking about what our district does for students with autism and how we program. And then we have more sessions coming up in January and in the spring. We'll announce those dates later after they're set, and the topics. If there's something specifically you'd like more information on, please let me know, and you can fill out the feedback form that will come after this, and we'll look at that, and we'll try to make sure that our parent engagement sessions are timely and information that might be helpful for you as a parent. So we're open for that feedback as well. So please fill out that survey that we send to you at the end of this engagement session today, so we can see your questions, we can provide answers to your questions, and we can get feedback about future sessions. Linda, would you like to close us out?
Yeah, I think I just had one additional part to add. I get questions quite a bit from families about how long teams and interventionists what the timeline is. So how will we know how long to wait before we're changing interventions? And so I don't think that there's an exact timeline, but just know that that's what the interventionists, the SPED teachers, the SLPs, the mental health providers, that's what they're doing on a daily basis and where their expertise comes in. So like Sarah said as well, I think everyone's happy to sit down and talk about the data, talk about the interpretation of what the data is, and then also talking about the interventions that, you know, we're performing every day for the students in relation to the curriculum too. So I can end it, or I can send it over to Nancy.
Thank you so much, Linda. I want to thank you and all of our presenters today for taking the time to really do a nice presentation on this important topic. Like I said earlier at the beginning of the session, this is being recorded. And so we will post the recording of this session on our district website, as well as a copy of the slide deck that we used today. We look forward to doing more presentations like this on different topics throughout the year. As Sarah mentioned, we're going to schedule one every other month. So with that, we'll give you a little bit of extra time in your day. I want to thank everybody who was viewing. We had up to 115 participants today, so that's a great turnout. We really appreciate it, and have a great day.